There's someone in your life who used to be everywhere, at every family gathering, every birthday, every phone call, and then they just stopped. Slowly, quietly, without drama, and the strange part, they seem happier than ever. So what happened? Did they give up on people? Did something go wrong? Are they depressed? Most people assume the worst, but here's what almost nobody talks about. What if pulling away isn't a sign of losing something, but of finally understanding something? Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will change the way you see this completely. Most people look at someone who starts pulling away after 50 and think one thing: they're lonely. Or worse, they gave up. Society has a story about this. The story says that the more people you have around you, the better your life is. That a full calendar means a full life. That staying connected means staying alive. So when someone starts saying no to invitations, when the calls get shorter, when the group chats go unanswered, we assume something is broken. But here's the problem with that story. It's wrong. Not just a little wrong, completely wrong. Because what looks like withdrawal from the outside is something entirely different on the inside. And once you understand what's really happening, you'll never see it the same way again. Pay attention to this next part, because this is where most people miss it completely. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret is 54. She spent most of her adult life being what everyone needed her to be. The one who showed up, the one who answered, the one who never said no. Family dinners, she was there. Coworker drama, she listened. Friends in crisis at 11 p.m., she picked up the phone. For decades, her life was built around being available, and she was exhausted. Not the kind of exhausted that sleep fixes, the kind that builds up quietly, year after year, until one day you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself anymore. Then something happened. She can't even name exactly when it started, but slowly she began to notice something. Some relationships drained her, every single time. The friend who only called when something was wrong. The family member who turned every visit into a performance. The coworker who made every conversation about themselves. And for the first time in her life, Margaret asked herself a question she'd never allowed herself to ask before. Why am I still doing this? Not with anger, not with resentment, just genuinely, curiously. And she didn't have a good answer, so she stopped. Not dramatically, she didn't announce it. She didn't send a message explaining herself. She just began to choose differently. She started spending Sunday mornings alone, drinking coffee in silence. And it felt like breathing for the first time in years. She started saying, "I can't make it," to things that used to feel obligatory. And here's the thing nobody expected. She didn't feel guilty. She felt relief. This is more common than you think, and there's a reason for it that goes much deeper than people realize. Hold that thought, because there's a detail here that almost nobody notices. Here's what tends to happen around 50 that changes everything. The brain shifts, not in a dramatic way, not overnight, but research in behavioral psychology consistently shows that as people move through their 40s and into their 50s, their relationship to time changes fundamentally. When you're 25, time feels infinite. You say yes to everything because there's always more time coming. But somewhere around 50, the perception of time shifts. You start to feel, not think, feel, that time is finite, that it's real, that it matters how you spend it, and that shift rewires everything. What used to feel like a small sacrifice, sitting through a dinner you didn't want to attend, now feels significant. What used to feel like loyalty, always being there for people who were never really there for you, now feels like a choice. And for the first time, many people allow themselves to make a different choice. But here's where it gets interesting, because behind this behavior, there is a psychological pattern that almost nobody talks about. And it explains not just why people pull away, but why they don't feel bad about it. Psychologists call it emotional selectivity, but forget the term. The concept is simple. As people get older, they stop trying to expand their world and start trying to deepen it. When you're young, more is more. More friends, more experiences, more connections, more opportunities. But after a certain point, something shifts. The hunger for quantity disappears, and what takes its place is a craving for quality. Real conversations instead of small talk. People who actually know you instead of people who just recognize your face. Silence that feels comfortable instead of noise that feels safe. This isn't giving up on people. This is finally being honest about which people actually matter. And here's the part that surprises everyone. The people who embrace this shift, who stop forcing themselves into spaces that drain them, don't end up lonely. They end up with fewer relationships that are deeper, more honest, and more sustaining than anything they had before. Think about someone you know who has gone through this. Is it possible that what looked like pulling away was actually arriving somewhere? Arriving at a version of life that finally makes sense to them? Because here's what I've noticed. The people who pull away after 50 and seem happier aren't the ones who stopped caring about people. They're the ones who stopped pretending to care about people they never really connected with in the first place. That's a very different thing, and it takes real courage to do it. Because the social pressure to stay connected, to stay available, to stay the person everyone has always needed you to be, that pressure doesn't disappear at 50. If anything, it gets louder. People ask why you've been so quiet. They wonder if you're okay. They take it personally. And the person who is finally, for the first time, living a life that fits them, has to hold their ground against all of it. Presta atenção nisso, because this next part is the one that changes everything. The real reason people over 50 pull away and don't regret it is not that they stopped loving people. It's that they finally started loving themselves enough to stop abandoning themselves. For decades, many people, especially those who were caregivers, people pleasers, or just deeply responsible adults, lived on a cycle of giving. Give your time, give your energy, give your attention, give your presence. And at some point they looked around and asked, when does anyone give that back to me? And the answer for many of them was, they don't. Not because the people around them were bad, but because the structure of the relationship was built on one person always being available and another person always taking that availability for granted. And when that structure becomes visible, really visible, something changes. You realize that your presence was never really valued. It was just expected. And there's a profound difference between being valued and being expected. When you're expected, your absence is a problem. When you're valued, your presence is a gift. People over 50 who start pulling away are usually making a quiet, powerful decision. They're deciding to only be in spaces where they are truly wanted, not obligated, not expected, wanted. And that decision, as simple as it sounds, rewires their entire social life. The circle gets smaller, and it gets better. So if you're watching this and you recognize yourself in Margaret's story, if you've been feeling that quiet pull to simplify, to say no more often, to stop explaining yourself to people who never really listened anyway, that's not something going wrong with you. That's something going right. And if you see someone in your life who has started pulling away, a parent, a friend, a sibling, before you assume they're depressed or broken, consider the possibility that they've finally figured something out that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. They figured out that peace is worth protecting, and that protecting it sometimes means letting people go, not with anger, with clarity. Now I want to ask you something specific. Has this happened to you? Have you ever felt that pull to simplify your life, to let some relationships go, but felt guilty about it? Or do you know someone over 50 who has gone through this shift and you finally understand them a little better now? Leave that in the comments, because I read every single one. And if you saw yourself in any part of this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. But before you go, I need to tell you something. What we talked about today is just one piece of this, because there's a behavior that happens before the pulling away, a quiet signal that appears much earlier, sometimes years earlier, that almost nobody notices in time. And when you learn to recognize it, in yourself or in someone you love, everything makes a lot more sense. That's what the next video is about. And trust me, you don't want to miss it.